Welcome into Caturday Checkdown. I am not Jordan Mathis. If you've been watching and listening for a while, you know that already. But if you're new, this is a little bit of a different situation this week. Jordan is out. Hope to have him back next week. But for now, I am usually your co-host, Braden and Tim, stepping in as host today. And then on the other side of your screen, or if you're listening, just on the other side of the mic, you've got our man of many hats. He's a cameraman. He's a producer, soon-to-be husband. He's wearing all the hats. Mr. Tim Smith. Tim, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I'll say my fiance will appreciate that you threw in the soon-to-be husband, included her in on this. But good, staying busy. Filling in for Jordan this week. So I'm excited to talk some football for once. I'm usually on the other side talk about basketball.
Yeah, last night the Cats coverage crew got probably their biggest interview so far with four-star center commit Malachi Moreno. That was really awesome to see. So if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely go check that out on the Cats coverage feed. But there's a lot to get into here on this episode. We're doing it a little bit later in the week. We're recording this on Thursday, so we are 2 days away from kickoff between South Carolina and Kentucky, the first game of the SEC season overall, and of course for both teams. Pivotal game for both teams, but there was also a game 5 days ago that we have yet to talk about. So we're going to quickly go back there, and I say a game, but I really mean like 2.5 quarters of a game. Tim, before we get into the ins and outs of the actual game, you were at the stadium Saturday. I was at home, which I think I got the better end of that bargain, given all that happened on Saturday. So just kind of walk us through, getting into the stadium finally, which I'm assuming you probably got in a little earlier because you're media. But then getting into the stadium at whatever time that was to finally getting out at about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, I will say you did have the better end of the stick there, being at home. You knew more what was going on than every single fan at the stadium did, because Kroger service doesn't have the best of service. I'm sure some of us know. But yeah, it was a roller coaster day. It was nice and sunny. Everybody's happy to be there. Next thing you know, it's pouring down rain, and then boom, sun comes back out. So the pregame was still going strong. Fans were going to let the rain kind of demise that. But yeah, we get in and go down into the field, and I'm waiting down there with several other media members, and nothing's happening. We see Stoops come out. We're wondering what's going on. Of course, you can't talk to Stoops, but still wondering what's going on. Time goes by. There's no announcements going on or anything. And the sports director at Fox 56, Michael Epps, finally got some service. He's like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be a delay," and he kept letting us know about the delay. And as I'm sure we all know, well, first of all, I feel bad for the DJ, because they've had to keep the whole entire crowd entertained for a whole 2 hours. They were playing "Living on a Prayer." They were playing "Money Money." They were pulling everything out of their pocket to keep the crowd entertained. But yeah, kickoff was 10:30. What we saw from the game, it was exciting. And then halftime was cut short. Never heard that before. That was interesting. And then, of course, the third quarter was cut short as well. And we had to go home. And I was talking to Trace. We got out of there probably at 2:30. Had that game going on, we maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock would have been getting home.
Yeah, that's a rough night.
Yeah.
And I'll ask you this. I mean, because us watching on TV could kind of see once halftime hit, it seemed like some of the players went to the locker room, but most of the team stayed on the field. Is that what happened, or did the entire team end up going into the locker room, or do you know what happened there?
Yeah, it seemed like they went in there just for a few minutes at least, and it came right back out. It was just a short trip to the locker room, probably, do their personal stuff, bathroom, whatever it was, come back out, ready to play.
Yeah, it was just overall just a weird night for opening night for the Wildcats. But in between all of that chaos, we saw some football. And I think it was some pretty good football at that. Obviously, folks watching this, where we're doing this a little bit later in the week, we're going to kind of go quickly through the Southern Miss game and really get into the meat and potatoes of the South Carolina game. But I do want to quickly go back over the Southern Miss game. I think what everyone really wants to talk about, of course, is Brock Vandegrift. He came out first series. I don't think he knows exactly what a slide is. And Tim, you kind of had that view on the field. Could you, I mean, from a straight shot, did it ever look like Brock wanted to slide at all?
Not one bit. I mean, that first play, that first drive especially, he took a lick where he kind of got tackled in the upper body area and then also right around the knee. And he like next thing I know, he's on the ground. And there were a few other times that not only did I see him get licked, I heard it too. It was clear as day.
Yeah. So we saw Brock get hit a few times, and then he ended up throwing an interception there on that first drive. But then he came back out and he led another drive down the field, scored a touchdown in the corner of the end zone to Barryon Brown. And for the rest of the game, he was pretty solid. He did have a near pick six, which I don't know how the defender dropped that, but it should have been to the house the other direction. But really, outside of those two plays, I thought Brock played a very clean game for it being his first time starting in, I think, 3 years the other night. And then, of course, what everyone's kind of talked about coming into the year is how stifling and elite this Kentucky defense is supposed to be. And when you pitch a shutout, given I know it was an entire game, but still, given pitching a shutout in 2.5 quarters, I think really goes a long way to prove that point. There were 2 drives that I can think of in particular where Southern Miss did drive it down the field, but then the defense made some opportune plays, had a couple tip balls, got some interceptions, and made up for those drives. Tim, obviously, once again on the field, could you tell us, because something I talked about last week whenever Jordan was with us was I wanted to see Kentucky just look like an SEC team. And just based on seeing the guys next to each other alone, could you tell a difference between the Kentucky players and the Southern Miss players?
I mean, for sure. I mean, the outliers, obviously, Deion Walker, massive guy. And, I got a pretty cool snapshot of him, kind of penetrating the O-line, and there's 2 guys holding on to him, and he's still just, a giant over those guys. And, it was awesome to see. You were talking about those interceptions. It was Dooley and then Demosh Johnson that got those. Was it right? Was there a third? Or was that just the only 2?
Yeah, it was. It was Dumas Johnson and then J.Q. Hardaway. I got the tip ball. From
J.Q. Hardaway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those of course they made their drive down to play, but ended up making up for it there. But of course, you want to see them, not let arguably the worst FBS team in college football right now make that drive all the way down there first. But still, defense looks strong. Physically, you could tell there was quite the difference there.
That's a pretty bold take to say Southern Miss is the worst FBS team, because I've seen Florida State. I've seen Florida State 2 weeks in a row. I'm starting to think they might take that cake there. But yeah, no. Watching on TV, it looked the same way. Kentucky just looked overall like a better football team, and then they proved it on the field too, of course. But looking at the run game offensively, because obviously we're still without Chip Trayanum. Hopefully he'll be back next week for Georgia. I think he's going to be huge to have in that game. Something that I talked about last week is I kind of expected Kentucky to try to kind of put an emphasis on the pass game. And overall, it seemed like they did. But I will say there were quite a few explosive run plays. Jason Patterson got involved. Obviously, Sumo Karimbe was the lead back. And then even Jamari Wilcox got in there, and he got rocked on one play, I can remember. But it was nice to see those trio of guys get some play. And, it's a little bit different of a running style than what we're kind of used to now with the Benny Snells and the Chris Rodriguez of, they're not going down on first contact. There were a couple runs where we got hit in the backfield, and those guys just really don't have the strength to kind of bounce off those tackles. But Chip Trainum will bring that to the table when he returns. But then on the flip side, you also saw maybe a little bit more explosiveness in the run game than what a Benny Snell or a Chris Rodriguez brought to it. And then Ray Davis was kind of like the Swiss Army knife of those two. He could kind of do a little bit of both. But yeah, so overall, I think on both sides of the football, Kentucky put together a pretty good performance given everything else that went on around that game with the lightning delays and the late start, and then the shortened halftime break, and just all of the just wacky stuff that doesn't usually happen that happened in that game. So Tim, I'll ask you this: if you had to grade Kentucky's Week 1 performance, how would you grade it and why?
Man, I mean, like I was just kind of backpedaling here a little bit, you know, not to throw shade. I don't like to throw shade, but Southern Miss, brand new team, they could be considered one of the worst FBS teams. So there were moments in which we're like, I was sitting there thinking, this is Southern Miss. We shouldn't be letting them get these type of things. But then there are other times Brock Vandergriff really showed kind of his patience in the pocket and his ability to get out there and scramble. Of course, he has that toughness, like almost like Will Levis, but you still want him to slide because he's not big and beefy like Will Levis is. But
definitely.
I mean, overall, I'd say I don't want to say A, but maybe a B plus.
That's fair. I was kind of in the B plus A minus range myself. I mean, there's still several things that I want to see get better as the weeks go on. I thought, obviously, which it got better throughout the game, but still going forward, I would like to see like those third down conversions in the first half. Southern Miss had, I believe, 3 consecutive third down conversions. I think 2 of which were pretty long distances. Those plays, those can't happen once you get into SEC play. Those teams will take advantage of that. But overall, yeah, I mean, I think a B plus to A minus is a fair grade. And yeah, I mean, it's a smaller sample size than what you'd like going into week 2 against a conference opponent, but you were able to play enough of a football game to where it counted, which I think is honestly just what was the main goal of last weekend, considering everything that happened. So Kentucky gets out with 31-0 victory, and that leads us to week 2. South Carolina comes to town. It'll be a 3:30 kickoff on ABC. I expect Kroger Field to be rocking. Tim, are you going to be at that game?
I am. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Me and Ethan, we're going to be there.
All right. So first of all, what do you expect from the environment at Kroger Field on Saturday?
Well, I get College Game Day mixed up with the SEC show that they do, but
yeah. Like
they're gonna
Nation.
SEC Nation. Yeah, they're gonna be there. So you already know with them being there, they're gonna draw that crowd, and it's gonna be electric. However, I always think back to that game against South Carolina where Bud Dupree walked it off with a pick 6, and how that's a nighttime game, all the crowds in a blackout. Kentucky's in a blackout. So I always really wish that the South Carolina matchup would be a night game. That would have just made the atmosphere even more electric, I feel like. But weather's looking good. Gotta say, it's going to be a nice 70 degrees, nice fall weather. So after last weekend especially, there's going to be a large crowd out there. I think it's going to be electric.
Yeah, and also it's worth noting, I mean, and Stoops thank the fans for last weekend because, I mean, and I tweeted it out myself, I expected a large portion of that crowd to leave on Saturday after all the delays. But, I mean, most of the crowd stayed. And on TV, it seemed loud. The environment seemed really good for opening game against a subpar team. So honestly, given the fact that the game got cut short and obviously just the magnitude of the game Saturday, I have a feeling this crowd is going to be really rowdy and really excited on Saturday. I expect a full house. I saw where they're doing a white out in the student section. Not really sure why they don't just go ahead and do it for the whole stadium, but it is what it is. Probably won't get to see those new blue LED lights, given the time of day it's going to be. Maybe late into the game if it gets dark enough, you can see them. I know they brought them out probably a little earlier than what they wanted to this past Saturday, like just to keep the crowd entertained during that delay. But yeah, I expect the environment to be good. So then the question is, how does Kentucky perform in that environment? Um, let's start with a little bit of South Carolina deep dive. Starting quarterback is a redshirt freshman. This will be his first start on the road, first conference start, and that is Lenoris Sellers. He's a big guy. He's a mobile guy. He can run the ball. He ran the ball 22 times. We talk about Brock Vandergrift taking off. Sellers ran 22 times this past Saturday against Old Dominion. He tallied up 68 yards on the ground and a touchdown. So Kentucky has to be ready to defend his legs. And then through the air, safe to say, not a great performance. 10 for 23, under 50% completion for 114 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions for Sellers. South Carolina's offense just really struggled to get going. And it was against an Old Dominion team that we don't really know too much about, but I'll say this: they're a home underdog this week against East Carolina. So if that's any sort of indication as to what Vegas thinks of Old Dominion, then that's not a really good sign for the Gamecocks coming in this Saturday. And then they have a transfer running back, Rocket Sanders from Arkansas, so he has some SEC experience. He's coming off of a pretty major injury. He ran the ball 24 times this past Saturday. He averaged 3.7 yards per carry. So that South Carolina O-line, and then also South Carolina gave up 4 sacks. So this South Carolina offensive line, which has been putrid the past year or two, there's a lot of talk in the offseason about it improving. And if that Old Dominion game was any indication of where they're heading, I don't see the improvement. I think Kentucky's defensive line might eat them alive, like literally eat them alive, especially Deion Walker. He might be able to take on 2 of those guys. Tim, I'm not going to Tim's taking one from the team today, guys. He's not necessarily the most football inclined guy, but he knows. But I know he knows Deion Walker, and I know he knows that defensive line of Kentucky. Should on a scale of 1 to 10, how worried should South Carolina be about facing that Kentucky D line?
10 due to Deion alone. I mean, the dude's used to being double teamed, so I don't think he'll have any sort of struggle at all. And I mean, going back on kind of what you said, just about me not knowing much about football. Thankfully, college football 25 did come out, so I've been playing that. My knowledge has just expanded a little bit. But yeah, I mean that D line is going to be a key factor when it comes to this game because, like you're saying, South Carolina does not have much of a passing game, and with our DBs back there, I know we gave up a few big plays against Southern Miss. Hopefully they've those kind of things have been critiqued and they coming in understanding what they can do to improve, but they're going to be running that ball. So that D-line is going to be a big factor.
Absolutely. And they're going to be running the ball, whether it's Rocket Sanders or whether it's Sellers. I think that's honestly, and I hate to say this because anytime I say something like this, it ends up coming back to bite me. But I really have no worries about this game. I mean, Kentucky is a 10-point favorite against an SEC opponent. That really doesn't happen for Kentucky, except unless it's Vanderbilt sometimes. But for it to be a non-Vanderbilt team and Kentucky be a double-digit favorite. That doesn't happen. So obviously Vegas has confidence. Obviously the bettors have confidence, and I think the BBN does too. Which honestly, almost all of that confidence kind of leaves me a little unconfident. It kind of scares me, to be honest, because we're used to these Mark Stoops led teams having that chip on their shoulder and him using that as motivation. Honestly, Shane Beamer is very similar in that aspect, as he likes that chip on the shoulder role, and I think he's definitely going to try to use it to their advantage on Saturday. I'm by no means a Shane Beamer guy, and I know Mark Stoops isn't either, based on their past history. But one thing Shane Beamer can do is he can motivate some guys, and so. But really, the only thing that worries me about South Carolina is the running ability of Lenore Sellers, because Kentucky may have the perfect coverage downfield, they may swallow their O-line alive, and yet if Sellers can get outside the pocket and find some space, then there may be some hidden yards in the game that ends up getting South Carolina some points that could end up, turning the game the other way. So Kentucky has to hone in on the quarterback run game Saturday to win. Flipping to the other side of the ball, I think South Carolina may feel the same way, and I think our O-line is better than South Carolina's, but they have some dudes on the edge. Kyle Kennard, a senior, 2.5 sacks this past Saturday, and then Dylan Stewart came out as a true freshman, and he got a sack and a half to start his collegiate career for the Gamecocks. They are going to do everything in their power to get after Brock Vandegrift and lay some licks on him. Given the, I don't want to say beating, but he took some licks this past Saturday. Given that Brock's kind of already been hit around a few times, do you think that is in the back of his mind in terms of getting hit possibly quite a bit on Saturday, or do you think he's just going to let it run?
Kind of going back to him not sliding, he seems to not have that fear. And I can't remember his exact words really, but he's talking during his post-game presser, he was mentioning about how kind of throughout high school and everything that his dad really coached him on being tough and trying to make plays and get those yards no matter what. So he's a tough guy. He's a real tough guy. I don't think, it might be a different story whenever he looks to his left and sees a big old dude running at him. But I'd say just going into the game, it's probably not too much of a concern of his.
Yeah. Let's just say it's going to be a big day for that Kentucky offensive line. They're going to need to really Marcus Cox and I believe Jalen Farmer there on the right tackle. They've certainly got their work cut out for them this Saturday. That is probably the matchup that is going to determine the game for me. And then also on the flip side, we talked about earlier, South Carolina's O-line versus Kentucky's D-line. I think those are the two matchups that are really going to decide this game. Otherwise, I feel like Kentucky is going to be able to throw the ball if he has time. We just talked about that. Old Dominion had a receiver, I believe his name is Isaiah Page, 8 receptions, 115 yards, and a touchdown against the Gamecocks. And no offense to Isaiah Page, but he is not Dane Key, he is not Barryon Brown, and he is not Jamori Macklin. So if one of those guys can have a big day on Saturday, then I think Kentucky is going to be looking really good. And here's the thing about this game. This game is going to determine both teams' outlook on the rest of the year. Next week, South Carolina goes home to face LSU. Probably not going to win that game. Next week, Kentucky hosts Georgia. Probably not going to win that game. So one of these teams is basically going to be looking at 1-2 after this game and not having the greatest of outlooks moving forward. So pivotal game. In a situation like this, being the home team, I think, is huge for Kentucky. I feel like if this game was in Williams-Brice, that 10-point line would be a lot closer to even. And also, no, South Carolina did not look good last week. And I don't. But going into the season, I didn't necessarily think South Carolina was a good football team. But there are times where people fall into the trap of just looking at week one and then just thinking that performance is going to determine how the rest of the year plays out. There's this old saying that, the most improvement within a season comes from week one to week two. And I expect South Carolina to look a lot better than they did on Saturday. But also I expect Kentucky to look better too, and they look pretty good. So for as confident as I am, like I said earlier, be careful because South Carolina still has some talented dudes, and they're an SEC team at the end of the day. I think Vanderbilt of all teams showed in the SEC that it just means more, and that any given Saturday, a team from the SEC can go out and beat anybody. Which, speaking of Vanderbilt, I tell you what, that game now makes me worry more than this game Saturday, to be honest. I don't know if you got the chance to see Vandy on Saturday, Tim, but I tell you what, better watch out for the Commodores.
Yeah, I did not get to watch it, but I saw the score and I was surprised. Maybe I need to go back and watch them. Maybe Vanderbilt's going to make a little bit of a run in the brand new stadium, which I got to say looks pretty good.
Well, it's half finished, but we're getting there.
Yeah, well, college football hasn't finished. College football 25, so it looks good in there.
Yeah, it looks great in there. Yeah, Vandy's a little scary. But as far as South Carolina goes, like I said, don't put too much into week one because, like I said already, there will be improvement from both sides. But South Carolina, I think Beamer's probably had himself I think he's probably had himself a few choice words throughout the week, getting these guys ready to come to Lexington. So I already made my prediction for this game earlier in the year on our podcast, so I'll just stick with that. But Tim, I do want to hear your prediction, and I also want to get your MVP for the game so we can keep track of this. So you have the floor, my friend.
I think you and I were in agreement on the score of it being 31-13. And MVP. Macklin.
It can be offensive or defensive.
Oh, yeah, that's true as well. I'll do both. I'll say the defensive MVP. I feel like it has to go to Dion. I think he's just going to chew that O-line alive. As far as offensive MVP, from what I saw from Macklin yesterday,
yeah.
I want to say Macklin. I would love to see a big game out of him. Going into the season, he was in a highly rated transfer coming out of North Texas and everything. I feel like everybody almost kind of overlooked him to keep looking at Dane Key and Barryon Brown respectively. But I think Macklin's kind of that dark horse in that receiving core.
Yeah, those are two great picks. Probably the two easy picks. You took the two easy picks on me. That's okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned the 31-13 score I made. So that was not in the podcast. Well, because prior to the season, I expect a little more from South Carolina than what I saw Saturday. But yeah, you're right. I'm going 31-13 Kentucky. I think since we're doing both, that's a good idea. Defensive MVP, since you stole Deion Walker, I'll take Pop Dumas Johnson. He got the interception on Saturday, and obviously he's played South Carolina several times in the past at Georgia. And also, I think he'll be vital in terms of, like we talked about, with keeping Sellers kind of under wraps in the passing game. Obviously, the linebackers will play a huge part in that. So he may get potentially double-digit tackles if they really try to run Sellers a lot throughout the game. Defensively, give me Pop Dumas Johnson. Offensively, give me since you took Macklin, I'll take Brown. Kentucky made a very concerted effort to get Barryon Brown the ball on Saturday, whether it was jet touch passes, which is my favorite play in college football 25. Whether it's that or they got them going in the vertical passing game a little bit. Brock had him, I think it was on a crosser to the left, and it went right through Barryon's hands. I know he wished he had that back. That would have been a big gainer. But they made sure, Bush Hamdan made sure to get the ball into Barryon's hands. And a quick note about Bush Hamdan, since I brought him up. I really like that we use the vertical passing game more and still mixed in the run with Bush Hamdan's offense. I won't go into deep as I did last time. And then defensively, we kind of know what Brad White is going to, run and stuff like that. So as a recap, Saturday looked good. This Saturday is going to look even better whenever Kentucky stomps in the Gamecocks and improves to 2-0 on national TV. And this time next week, we'll be talking about facing the number one team in the country with, I'm not going to say it, but I wouldn't be shocked if College Game Day is heading to Lexington next week, given the very poor schedule that I've seen. Really outside of Alabama, Wisconsin, the Week 3 schedule is pretty light. So don't be shocked if Herbie and Nick Saban and Pat McAfee are making their way to Lexington next week. But with that, Tim, I cannot thank you enough for really saving us this week. We really appreciate all you do behind the scenes and now bringing your beautiful face onto the camera. We're very thankful for that. And as far as Jordan goes, man, we miss you. We'll hopefully see you next week, and we'll get this thing back on the rails as usual. But for now, that's going to be it for this week's iteration of Caturday Checkdown. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.